There is a kind of silence that doesn't calm the body. It tightens it. It settles somewhere between the chest and the throat, like something constantly held back, something unfinished. You can be sitting next to someone you care about, sharing the same space, the same routine, even the same bed, and still feel internally untouched. Not unseen in an obvious way. Unreached. You're there. You respond. You participate. You listen closely, often more closely than anyone realizes. But the part of you that carries weight, the part that feels deeply, that reacts slowly, that needs time and safety to surface, never fully arrives. So connection feels partial. There's always a subtle sense that you're translating yourself into something more acceptable. Softer. Easier. Less demanding. You choose words carefully. You delay feelings until they feel reasonable. You let moments pass because interrupting them feels heavier than swallowing what you feel. From the outside, this looks like composure, emotional intelligence, even strength. From the inside, it feels like compression. Your emotions don't disappear. They condense. They sit in the body as tension, as fatigue, as a low-grade sadness that doesn't have a clear story attached to it. You might struggle to explain what's wrong, not because nothing is wrong, but because nothing ever reached the surface long enough to become visible. This is the loneliness quiet people carry inside relationships. Not the loneliness of absence, but the loneliness of unexpressed presence. This silence didn't come from nowhere. It was learned. At some point early on, emotional expression stopped feeling neutral. Saying too much changed the atmosphere. Showing disappointment created distance. Expressing need made things heavier instead of lighter. So you adjusted. You learned to read the room before reading yourself. To notice shifts in tone, energy, and mood before noticing your own internal reactions. Silence became a way to stay oriented, to avoid escalation, to keep things stable. Not dramatic stability. Emotional stability. Your nervous system learned that restraint reduced risk. That being easy kept connection intact. That asking for less made you easier to keep around. Over time, this became automatic. You didn't consciously decide to disappear. You simply learned to downscale yourself, slowly, subtly, until it felt normal. Until needing less felt like maturity. Until adapting felt like love. This is where the core paradox forms. Silence keeps relationships intact on the surface, but prevents them from becoming deep. It preserves proximity, but blocks intimacy. You remain connected, yet internally alone. Because intimacy requires friction. It requires visibility. It requires the risk of being felt, not just tolerated. And when silence becomes identity, relationships stop meeting the real you. They meet the version that learned how to survive. Over time, silence stops being a choice and becomes a reflex. What develops underneath is not emotional numbness, but emotional hypermanagement. A constant internal calibration of when, how, and whether something should be felt outwardly. Every impulse passes through an invisible filter. Will this disrupt the bond? Will this create distance? Will this be too much? The body learns to stay alert. Quiet people often live in a state of subtle vigilance, not panic, not fear in the obvious sense, but a continuous readiness to adjust. The nervous system becomes outward-facing, tuned to shifts in tone, posture, micro-expressions. Emotional safety is maintained not through boundaries, but through anticipation. This creates a strange internal split. Feelings are experienced fully, sometimes intensely, but expressed incompletely. The inner world remains rich, complex, emotionally nuanced, while the outer expression stays minimal, regulated, contained. Psychologically, this aligns with patterns of avoidant or disorganized attachment, though the word avoidant often feels inaccurate to those who live it. It's not closeness that is avoided. It's the risk embedded inside closeness. Connection feels desirable, but exposure feels dangerous. So silence becomes a compromise. A way to stay close without fully arriving. A way to be present without being vulnerable. Over time, this compromise begins to cost more than it protects. The body carries what the voice never releases. In relationships, this internal dynamic reshapes everything, quietly. Quiet people often become emotionally indispensable. They listen deeply. They remember details. They sense shifts before words are spoken. They stabilize situations simply by being attuned. Their presence lowers emotional volatility. But what is rarely noticed is what they give up to provide that stability. Needs are postponed. Discomfort is internalized. Boundaries soften not because they don't exist, but because enforcing them feels threatening to connection. Conflict becomes something to manage internally rather than engage externally. Nothing breaks loudly. Instead, intimacy thins. Moments that could have created closeness pass without being named. Feelings that could have deepened understanding remain private. Over time, the relationship becomes efficient but shallow, functional, but emotionally incomplete. Resentment doesn't surface as anger. It shows up as distance. A quiet withdrawal begins. Less emotional investment. Less spontaneity. Less risk. The relationship continues, but the inner sense of being met fades. Eventually, a painful awareness settles in: being appreciated is not the same as being known. Being needed is not the same as being understood. And for quiet people, that distinction hurts deeply, because what they long for is not attention, but recognition. The most damaging consequence of long-term silence is not conflict avoidance. It is self-erasure. Quiet people in relationships slowly internalize a dangerous hierarchy: other people's emotions feel urgent and valid, while their own begin to feel negotiable. Over time, discomfort is reframed as oversensitivity. Longing is reframed as neediness. Disappointment is reframed as personal failure. The inner dialogue shifts subtly. Maybe I'm asking for too much. Maybe this isn't important enough to bring up. Maybe I should just let it go. But nothing is actually let go. It is stored. Unexpressed feelings do not dissolve. They accumulate in the body as tension, in the mind as doubt, and in relationships as quiet disconnection. What looks like patience from the outside often feels like emotional starvation from the inside. Carl Jung warned that whatever is not brought into consciousness will live out its life as fate. For quiet people, this fate often takes the form of repeated relational patterns, being chosen for stability, reliability, emotional labor, while remaining unseen in depth. Love becomes something that feels conditional on restraint. Care becomes something that must be earned by being less. The pain here is subtle, but profound. It is the grief of realizing that parts of the self were never rejected, they were never even offered. Healing does not arrive as a dramatic breakthrough. It arrives as a quiet refusal. A refusal to keep disappearing in moments that matter. A refusal to confuse safety with self-silencing. A refusal to believe that love requires constant self-editing. For quiet people, growth does not mean becoming louder or more confrontational. It means allowing presence to replace adaptation. Letting emotions exist without immediately managing their impact. Trusting that expression does not automatically equal loss. This shift feels deeply uncomfortable at first. The body resists it. The nervous system interprets visibility as risk. Old instincts surface, urging restraint, urging silence, urging retreat. But something stabilizes when the self is no longer abandoned internally. Relationships respond to this change. Some deepen because real intimacy finally has something solid to meet. Others falter, revealing that connection was contingent on your quiet compliance. Both outcomes are clarifying. The goal was never to be fixed. It was to be whole. When quiet people stop shrinking, they don't become different. They become present. And presence, unlike silence, does not have to be earned. It simply stays.